the 7 signs that Jesus records for us in John, but we're going to continue in John. I'm going to slightly change gears a little bit. Unbeknownst to you all, I have been doing in those lessons what I'm going to talk about a little bit today as we transition into a little bit of a different thing, a different discussion that we're going to have. In John chapter 6, verse 45, the Bible tells us this: "It is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me." We looked at the first sign that Jesus did back in John chapter 2. What sign was that? Does anybody remember? Turning water into wine. And that was kind of the onset of his ministry, right? You remember he tells his mom, "My time has not yet come," but he listened to his mom's wishes, right? And from that moment on, after the baptism that we see of Jesus, his ministry really started taking off. How did he go about doing this ministry? What were his, not really his plans, but what was his mode of operation? How did he do it?
He recognized the need.
Okay.
He cared for people, and he always acted out of love for the person or the situation that the person was in.
He saw needs, he had love, he had compassion, and he met those needs, right? What else? What else do we see? He had a lot of followers. He spoke to a lot of people. He taught lots of people, right? Good. Who did he focus on, though? The poor, the needy. Come on. Keep digging. Sinners. Lost. Keep digging. Jews. Say that again, I'm sorry. Yes, he certainly needed help from his father. That's certainly true. Okay? All of these are right answers. Don't get me wrong. But keep digging. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Well, not really. I think, he said that he came to minister to the Jews. Eventually, the Gentiles are going to be a part of it, right? But as he is going about, say that louder. Say it right there in that, so everybody can hear you. He is focusing on his disciples, right? As Jesus begins his ministry, he begins to focus on just a few select men. Why do you think he did that?
Because he was going to be gone. And it would be up to them through the power of the Holy Spirit to continue.
He knew his time was short, right? And if his time's going to be short, you got to have somebody to carry on that message. Jesus definitely talked to large groups of people, right? And he gave his wisdom to them, but he saved his deepest teachings, his most intimate moments, for those inner group of followers that he had, those 12 disciples that he spent time with. He invited a small select group of men to leave everything that they knew, everything that they did, and to follow him. From the beginning, when he goes out and he offers this opportunity for them, he informs them that he would expect them to make disciples of other people. What does he tell his disciples? I'm going to make you what? Fishers of men. You follow me. You drop what you're doing. You have the courage and the willingness to come and be my disciple. I expect you then, you're going to be going out and making other disciples. He lived with them. He made his home with them. He knew their families. He ministered to their families. He took them with him as he ministered to people. He traveled with them. He explained what he was up to. He taught them how to pray. He challenged them to do ministerial work. He modeled the scriptures for them. He gave them authority over evil. He sent them out to preach, and he taught them how to make disciples. Right? Sometimes we now kind of get wrapped up in thinking that, I'm just going to come to church on Sunday morning. We'll sit in the pew. I'm gonna worship. I'll participate in worship. Maybe I'm just going to slightly be an active participant, but I'm going to listen to a lesson, and I'm being a follower of Christ. Is that what being a follower of Christ really looks like? Most of the time, we don't really become a follower of Christ, or we don't become Christ-like until someone takes us under their wing, or we take someone else under our wing, and we start to spend time with them. We model the scriptures for them. We teach them. We challenge them to be more like Christ, and then we start seeing the necessary changes being made, maybe in our life and in somebody else's life. What is the mission of the church? What's our mission? Spread the word. Make disciples. Right? That's what Jesus came down to do. And that's what Jesus told us to do. What is a disciple? Follower of Jesus Christ. What else is a disciple?
Someone who obeys as well.
Okay, someone who obeys Christ. A witness for Christ. Certainly a believer, absolutely. That's probably the number one thing we gotta be, right? How do we make disciples? Teach.
I think there's different ways.
Okay.
You could, like they call it, friendship, friend evangelism, get involved in, or be open to have people involved in your life so that you can share the gospel with them.
How did Jesus make disciples? I just read you a whole list of ways, right? He entered into the lives of these people, and he invited them to enter into their lives, right? He entered into an intentional relationship with others for the purpose of moving them towards maturity. How do we make disciples today? The same way Jesus did. We need to find an intentional relationship so that the purpose of it is to move not only them, but us too. You'll find that when you do this, maybe some skeletons in your closet start to rear their ugly heads too, and you are going to be able to face those things. Maybe you're going to be able to grow from those things, to move away from those things. Okay? If we're going to engage in that intentional relationship, what type of person does it have to be? Anybody you want to. It can be somebody who's outside of Christ, all the way to somebody who's a leader in the church, anywhere along the spectrum. To become a disciple, to be a disciple maker. It can be, certainly as parents, we need to be doing it with our children, right? We need to be having that discipleship relationship with our children. It can be people that you work with. It can be your neighbors. It can be people that you see all the time as you go to the coffee shop and get your $8 Frappuccino, mocha, whatever it is. Any of those things, right? Anybody that you're able to spend time with and pour yourself and allow them to pour themselves into you. It's going to have to involve, though, time. Time is going to be the key factor in this, right? You're going to have to take time How much time did Jesus spend with his disciples? Almost all of the 24 hours a day that he was with them. There were times when he removed himself so that he could go and be with his Father. Again, in our lives, we can't do that. Not for the most part. But it is going to take time to spend time with them. Okay, we're going to have to be intentional. That's why it's an intentional relationship. That's why it's going to be something that will take time. This is really, as we get a little farther, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I've been doing this with you guys this whole study, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. But we made an announcement maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago about this church breaking down into smaller sections where we're going to be spending time with people. We're going to be divided up into groups. Not that we're going to be divided, but that we can spend time with each other in a smaller setting. Maybe this can be a time where we begin this disciple-making process. Okay? What specific things should I do with the person that I'm building this relationship with? What kind of things do you think you should do? And again, who modeled this for us? Who taught us how to do this? Jesus Christ. What kind of things did Jesus do with his disciple? What kind of things do I need to do?
I think we need to be authentic.
100%. And that is going to be the hardest thing to do. To be authentic. What else? Set an example, okay?
We're going to have to know the word pretty well.
Yes, but don't let that scare you off. Okay, especially as we get to what I'm about to introduce.
You got a Bible study.
Yes.
Share your testimony.
Okay? Other ideas?
Don't be afraid, like if you get in a situation and you don't know the answer, don't be afraid to say, I don't know, but let's look.
I don't know. Let's find out together. Are you-
I suggest you about your groups. I was at a church one time, and they did that already. And these groups were not chosen by age. They were not chosen by job classifications. They were not chosen by color of skin. They were just chosen. There might be a few older folks in that group, but there were definitely some younger folks in that group. And I think everybody is guilty of trying to be with like people, people of the same age, people of the same likes. But that's not what it's about. It's building what you're talking about, those relationships, so that we don't have different mindsets for different age groups or different stature groups. You follow me?
Yes, sir.
I think that is an ideal way to go about making up groups to get to know each other. And maybe those switch every so often. You don't keep the same groups forever. Just keep fluid. That's my sense.
Anybody else? Other comments? Okay.
What do you think about it?
Somebody was fixing to say something? Yes. Well, you're jumping ahead. Did you see my notes? Some things that we can do. Live life with them. Love them. Commit to helping them move from where they are to a deeper relationship with Jesus. Eat meals together. Hang out with them in places that's not just church. Concerts, or me, I'm a sports fanatic, and a lot of things in my life revolve around sports. Invite them to baseball games or football games or whatever. Come over to my house. We're going to watch the football game this weekend. Things like that, where environments that aren't necessarily always going to be so deep and thought-provoking. Just sometimes it's just to hang out with them because you're going to live your life with them. But you got to have specific things too: prayer, Bible study, accountability, confessions, encouragement, support. Okay? How will you know if that person is maturing in Christ? 100%. Conversations will change. It'll go from, how you doing? How's the weather? Well, we hadn't had rain in 4 weeks. Man, we're having too much rain. It'll turn to authentic conversations. And then as you get more comfortable and you feel comfortable, and as you share things and they share things and people start to open up, the conversations could get really deep. It's going to be something that it's going to take time to build that trust. And trust is a hard thing to build, and it needs to be something where the trust is going to be taken very seriously. Because if I'm going to share something with you that is hard for me to share, and I know you're going to go blab it to everybody else, how often am I going to share something with you? Not ever, right? If you share something with me that is hard for you to talk about, and then I run and I talk about it with, you're not ever going to do that. Our trust is lost. That communication, those authentic conversations are lost. How am I going to help you move to a deeper relationship? How are you going to help me move into a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ? How are you going to help me mature the way I need to mature? Or how am I going to help that person mature the way they need to mature? Authentic conversations, absolutely. What else would show that they are maturing in Christ? Their attitude will certainly change. You'll find them leaving some of those desires for worldly things. They'll start to emphasize holy things more. What else? I'm sorry? The life they live will certainly change, right? They'll start to immerse themselves more into the life of the church. You'll find them looking for other people to start discipling. Because that's the whole point of this, right? Jesus made these 12 men, and he spent time with them because what did he expect them to do? Go and change the world. Change the world. It took 12 people to do that. 12 people. We want Azalea City to grow. Spend time in the lives of other people. And all of a sudden, we'll start seeing growth, right? One of the questions that successful businesses, actually two important questions that they ask. What is our business and how's business? What is our business as a church? What's our business? To make disciples. How's business going? Sometimes that can be a punch in the face, right? That could be a tough question to ask. What's our business? How's business? Who is a disciple maker? Is it just Terry, Justin, Taylor, the elders? Every one of us sitting in this room, every one of us that is sitting out there in that pew in just a few minutes. Every single one of us are disciple makers. So, one of the things that I discovered a while back before I started teaching, and it was kind of what led me to teach what I taught, was something called Discovery Bible Study. So, there is a church in Tennessee that prints these out, but if you go to their website, you can print them out yourself at home. They give you liberty. They give you the freedom to do this. They're not charging. But it's a bookmark to help you when you decide you want to sit down and spend time with somebody and disciple them. Okay? So on one side of it, it has scriptures, passages of scriptures that you can sit down at when you take your time to do your Bible study and you're praying. You can focus on just one small section of scripture and you can talk about it. The other side gives you the questions that you need to ask every time you sit down and do this Bible study. So, that's what I've done with y'all from the very beginning of these studies. The program step by step. So if you remember, when I started, I said I wanted to change kind of the way we did prayer request. And I started off with something first, right? I started off with what happened last week for which you are grateful. When you have these times that you spend with whoever it is that you want to develop a relationship, and it can be one person, two people, three people. I wouldn't suggest it be a group like this, because in a group like this, there's a lot of times that we don't want to share things. I don't want to open up to a group like this because I don't trust you, right? I'm not saying that in a negative. A lot of times we don't want to talk in big groups. So I don't know everything about you. I don't know what you're going to go and say. I don't want to open up. But if we get in an intimate group and we start to learn each other and we build that trust, now we can start to open up. So you start the group, hey, what are some things that you were thankful for last week? What things happened in your life that you could be thankful for? And you talk about it. You share things, okay? You move on to what challenges do you see happening in your life upcoming? Maybe what challenges are going on in your family? What challenges are happening at work? What are some things that are happening in your life that we can pray for or that I can help you with? And that builds those relationships. That builds that trust. Okay? The third question, once you start this, you're not going to ask the third question in the first group because the third question says, how did you obey, share, and meet the needs from last week's meeting? Well, if it's the first meeting, you ain't had that yet. But as you continue to meet and as you continue to devote that time, and it's real important that you spend time every week getting to know that person, spending time in Bible study, prayer, talking about these things. Now you can say, hey, remember what we talked about last week? How did you obey last week's lesson? Because that's going to be a question that's going to be asked further down the line. After you do those, you're going to take whatever passage that you're talking about that day. You're going to read the passage. And you're going to have somebody read it. And you're going to have somebody reread it. And then, so like after I read the passage, I didn't do the rereading because a lot of times we didn't have that much time. But in this time, there's no time limits. There's no set time, right? Read it. Reread it. Then retell what you just read so that you kind of know everybody is on the same page. Everybody understands what we're talking about. If you remember, I'd read the passage and I said, hey, somebody summarize what we just talked about. Okay? Read the passage. Now you're going to go to a series of questions. It's not going to be difficult. It's not going to be hard. You're going to ask 4 questions. 4 easy questions. Does anybody remember what the first question I asked was after we read it and I asked somebody to summarize it? Anybody remember? Man, I just don't make that good of an impression. What do we learn about God? What do we learn about God in this passage? It could range from a lot of things. It can range from somebody who has been in the scriptures a long time, sees things differently than maybe this person that you're bringing along who is outside of Christ. Maybe they don't really understand what they're looking at yet. It can be a wide spectrum of things. And there can be answers that you say, well, Maybe, but let's kind of explore that a little bit more. What do we learn about God in this passage? Next question, what do we learn about people? What do we learn about ourselves? So, how can I put myself in that? How do I see the people that God is speaking to, or what's happening in this story that we can draw lessons from, that we can take out and apply to our lives so that we can be the type of Christians that we want to be, we need to be, we can move into that Christ-like attitude. How will you put this passage into practice? How are we going to apply this to our lives to move up the scale of that maturity level? Okay? So that question goes back to the third question that how did you put this passage in? How did you obey, share, and do what we talked about last week? How am I going to put this into practice this week? So then the next week when we meet, hey, how did you answer this question this past week? Who do you know that needs to hear this? How many times did I ask you guys when we're done, hey, there's somebody that you know that needs to hear this. Share it with them today. The answer obviously is always going to be, well, everybody needs to hear that. That's too broad. Think about someone specific. You know what? My neighbor, we were kind of talking about something along these lines the other day. I need to share this with that neighbor. I need to share this with my coworker. This could be, they're going through this exact same thing right now. Maybe I can share this with them and it might bring them some comfort, might bring them some wisdom. Who do I need to share this with? And I need to do it. I need to make a concerted effort to do it. And then the last thing you're going to do before it's all over, before we pray maybe, is ask the fifth question. How can we help you with one of the challenges that you mentioned? Question number 2, how can we help you with this challenge? Maybe in the coming weeks, in the future. How can I help serve you and love you? How can I do it? So, turn to John chapter 13. We're going to do our first. No, we're not going to do our first. We're going to do our 8th Discovery Bible Study. Because I've been doing them with you. John chapter 13. We only have a few minutes. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? Jesus answered him, what I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, if I don't wash your feet, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, the one who has bathed does not need to wash, except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, not all of you are clean. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, Blessed are you if you do them. I am not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen. But the scripture will be fulfilled. He who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I am telling you this now before it takes place, that when it does take place, you may believe that I am he. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. Summarize that briefly. What just happened here?
He was like practicing, okay, this is a sacrifice. I'm doing this as your servant by washing your feet. But he's getting ready to go to the cross.
Yes.
So this is an important thing he wants to teach them, that you serve one another. One other thing, if I can, let's see. When he was talking to Simon about washing their feet, and he says, what I'm doing you don't understand right now, but you will. That's a lot. Sometimes things happen in our lives and we don't understand it, but someday we will.
Right. Why are we going through this right now? That just doesn't make any sense. Months, years down the road. Oh, that's why that was happening. What else do we observe? What else is happening? What else is going on? Letting them know some of them aren't clean. Well, wash me. Well, you're clean. Your feet are dirty, but some of you aren't clean. Were they dirty? Did they have mud on them? Was their hair not washed? Right? Some of you aren't clean. Your heart's not where it needs to be. Okay? What do we learn about God in this passage? Jesus. What do we learn about God/Jesus? Gracious. Wants us to be saved. He does know the heart of man.
He was still in his teaching. This is just before he went to the cross.
He is fixing to go through the worst thing that you could possibly go through as a human. Imagine the stress that he's under, as we'll see as he goes to the garden to pray. The stress that he's under. Imagine how you are, and if you want to know how I am, ask my wife. Think about how your attitude and your demeanor and everything when you are stressed. How are you as a person? Are you pleasant to be around? Probably not always. I'm not very pleasant to be around. My fuse is about this long anyway, but when I'm stressed, it's probably about that long. I'm snappy. I imagine Jesus is pretty anxious right here because he knows what's about to happen. They don't, but he does. What is he doing? He is still teaching. He is still preparing his disciples to go out and change the world. That's impressive. What else do we learn about God? He knew somebody at the table was about to do the very thing that he's anxious about. And he didn't treat him any different. He still washed his feet. If you had the foresight to know that somebody was about to stab you in the back, would you treat them kindly? I wouldn't. Okay, I'm going to open up to you guys. I wouldn't talk to them. Certainly wouldn't wash their feet. Jesus did. Before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in he loved them to the end. Who in your life do you love to the end? Your husband and your children. Anybody else?
Nobody said as important as they were.
That's right. There's nobody that important in your life. Do I love you guys? Yes, I do. I do. We're supposed to love it. That's a hallmark of a Christian, right? What is God? God is love. We as Christians should be the same as God. We should be about love. But you know what? I'm human. I'm human. If somebody walked in this room right now and threatened the lives, I feel pretty certain that I would, you know what? Take me. Take me instead. Leave. I feel certain that I would do that. Please don't come in and challenge me, but I feel certain. But if this was a group of, if it was to happen in Walmart, I don't know that I'm jumping in front of, if they're taking this guy, I'm probably not going to say, you know what? Let him go, take me instead. Probably not going to happen. You know what? I'm going to go out and say, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to sacrifice myself if they've already picked somebody. Jesus did it anyway. He did it anyway. Even for Judas, who is there fixing to stab him in the back, did it anyway. He loved them to the end. He loved them like I love my wife and I love my kids and I love my parents and I love my brothers. He loved them more than that, right? What do you think about... Do you think God looks at you that way? True, like, think about it before you just answer and say, yeah. Do you really think about God feels about you that way? Even when you have done those secret things that you don't want anybody else to know about? Even when you have committed sins and as you're doing it, you say, I know this is wrong. I'm just going to have to ask for forgiveness later. You think God still looks at you and loves you like that? Okay? How does God demonstrate that in this passage right here? Not going to the cross. Think about it. We're focusing on this right here. How does God demonstrate that in this passage? What does Jesus do? Takes his, say again? Treat them all the same. Takes his coat off, grabs a towel, grabs a bowl of water, gets down on his feet, and does the job of what? A slave, a servant, right? He does the job of a servant. And then he goes on to say, a servant is not above his master. Who's the master in this situation? Jesus is. A messenger is not greater than the one who sent the message. Who's giving the message? Jesus. What does he tell him to do? Go and do the same thing. Go and do the same thing. Do you think it's possible to love someone without serving them? That's a deep question, isn't it? Is it possible to love someone without serving them? It's just kind of lip service, right? If you really love someone, it's not serving them, is it? If you really love someone, it's not really serving them in that, it's not really serving them, like putting yourself beneath them. Right? When you are serving someone, what type of attitude do you have? When I ask that question, think about doing something out of an obligation, or think about doing something because it's something that you want to do. So for instance, because it's Thanksgiving, it's kind of fresh. If I was to go and serve at a soup kitchen because a group at church was doing it, hey, I'm going to go down with the group at church and serve at the soup kitchen. While I'm doing it, is my attitude a good attitude, or is it like, man, there's a lot of other places I'd rather be, but you know what, I'm serving, I'm doing the will of God, I'm serving these people. Which one's out of love and which one's out of obligation? So when I ask that question, how's your attitude while you're serving someone?
Well, we need to be setting that example. So it should be good.
It should be. Only I can answer that question for me, and only you can answer that question for you. I think I can answer that question for my wife at times. Let me illustrate. I make fun of her because she does laundry all the time. But that woman does not want us to go with dirty clothes. If I'm doing laundry, if I'm doing the kids' laundry, my attitude is, why aren't these stinking, ungrateful kids doing their own laundry? They're big enough, they can put their own stuff in the washing machine. Why am I sitting here doing it? She's not that way. She goes, hey, give me your clothes. I'm doing laundry. It's out of love. I know she loves us, and I love my kids. My kids are big enough and grown enough, they can do their own laundry. It ain't my job anymore. And that's my attitude when I'm serving them in the laundry room. That's a poor example, but think about that attitude that I have. Is that one out of love for my kids? Extrapolate that out to other times when we're serving, and not just our kids. How's our attitude? Jesus' attitude right here, how we see God here, God loved them. He loved them to the end. And he said, you know what? I'm fixing to model something for you. I know what's going to happen to me in the next few hours. I'm going to use this moment to teach. And I'm going to show you what it's like to be a servant. And you're going to go out and do the same thing. And he did it out of love. Anything else we learn about God in this passage? All right, really quick because we're running out of time. What do we learn about ourselves? What do we learn about people in this passage?
Relationship,
What do you mean?
fellowship with others.
Okay.
Sometimes it's hard to allow people to
It is. It is hard sometimes to allow people to serve you. Who shows us that? Peter, right? Jesus, you're not going to wash my feet. Oh, but I am. You have to let me. Because if you don't let me, you're not going to be a part of me. Well, then dump it all over me, God, because I'm a part of you. We don't have time to explore this, but I got a lot to explore about that. But it's hard sometimes to let people serve us. What else?
I want to keep on saying the word humble. We need to humble ourselves. Keeps going through my mind. Humble.
That's a big part of being a servant, isn't it? We can't think, of all the people in this room, who is the greatest in this room? Who's the one that needs to be having his feet washed, being bowed down to, being worshiped? God's Son, right? If anybody had an opportunity not to be humble, especially about what's fixing to happen, it would have been him. He humbled himself. We're not bigger than anybody else. That's not to say we shouldn't show respect to people. It's respect to people in authority, respect to people who have a higher earthly position than us. But that doesn't give us the right to look down on somebody because I may think I have a higher position than them. I need to humble myself and be like Jesus and be a servant.
I think sometimes people think that it's all about them, but really it's never about us.
Good. Anybody else? It is about love. This whole story is about love, isn't it? Jesus, again, is modeling love for us. What else? How will you put this passage into practice this week? How are you going to apply this to your life? Who can you serve out of love and not obligation? Whose metaphorical feet can you wash this week? And along those lines, who do you know that needs to hear this? Who in your life right now needs to hear this? Because they need to know, number one, that, hey, I'm here for you. I'll serve you in any way that I can. But maybe they need to humble themselves and learn how to serve other people. Absolutely. All those, again, like we said, the answer can always be everybody needs to hear this. But I want you to not be so broad, and I want you to bring it down to a personal level. Who in my life that I'm around needs to hear this? Thank you guys for your attention. I appreciate it. I hope this has been helpful for you. For the next couple of weeks, we're gonna implement this as we look at some more passages from Jesus' talk with his disciples right here at this when he's in the upper room and as he's getting ready to be betrayed and ultimately crucified. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.